The royals are lucky the whole world lies at their feet. The queen is the person with the highest power, she is at the top of the social pyramid. It would seem that such a fate can only be envied. In fact, ordinary people have been doing it since time immemorial, even the proverbs remain, she lives like a queen. Say, what a queen she has found, only she lacks the moon from the sky. Quote. But actually women had to pay for the privilege of being in a special royal position. No personal happiness, no personal life, everything is for the good of the country, everything is for great political goals. The queen could not even give birth in a calm atmosphere, in the presence of those closest to her. Childbirth also became a political process. The 15-18 centuries is a period when no one even tried to challenge the succession of royal power by right of birth. At this time, the life of the royal couple was in full view. From the moment they woke up to the moment they went to bed, the royals were accompanied by courtiers and servants. In fact, it was as if they spent all 24 hours at work, no intimacy, no privacy. It was especially hard for queens when it came time to give birth to an heir. The duty of the wife of the head of state to give birth to a boy to whom the country would be entrusted was considered the main goal of her life. If a woman could not get pregnant, she was easily replaced by another, for example, exiled to a monastery, so as not to interfere with the king to accept a new applicant for the role of the mother of the future prince. And sometimes even executed for some offense. The wife of a king or czar only after the fulfillment of the sacred duty of bearing a son to her husband gained real honor and respect. Thus, the wife of the future Alexander I, Elizabeth, could not get pregnant for several years after her marriage. She complained bitterly that her father-in-law, Paul I, puts herself in nothing and believes for a craftsman, called to make children. The situation was exactly the same as in Russia in Europe. The same attitude to the crowned wife of the head of state was practiced. The heir must be male. In order to ensure that there was no deception during childbirth, so that a newborn girl could not be switched with a boy or a stillborn baby could not be switched with a live one. The process of giving birth to a queen in Europe was monitored by many people close to the court. The year is 1661. The chambers of the young Maria Theresa, wife of Louis XIV, are in turmoil. Maria is in labor. The courtiers are crowded into the rooms, fussing, talking and trying to get closer to the queen's bed. Everyone wants to see who Maria Theresa will give birth to. The courtiers watch the process for all the long hours while the labor continues, right up to the moment the baby is born. Musicians and actors gather under the windows. At the king's behest, they play Spanish music. The head of state believed that this would make it easier for his wife to unburden herself. But Maria Theresa no longer cares. She is exhausted by the pain, having to endure the festive crowd around her at such a difficult hour. From her mouth cries, "I do not want to give birth. Let me die," she screams in her native Spanish. But all things come to an end. A weary Maria Theresa has given birth to a boy. Now she can sleep. For a while, maybe a few weeks, she will be put to bed and finally be left alone. She has done her duty. In 1778 in Versailles, Marie Antoinette, realizing that she was about to go into severe labor, rang a bell. Instantly, numerous courtiers came running. But it cannot be said that they all came to help. All these people came to see who the queen would give birth to. Some even climbed up to the gallery for a better view. Marie Antoinette gave birth to a baby girl. The young mother, whose strength was running out, lost consciousness after the last push. But for a few minutes no one even paid attention to this. Everyone was preoccupied with the newborn. Finally someone saw that the queen was lying senseless. Then they only realized, rushed to open the windows, ran around the queen with genuine fright. It all worked out, the queen survived. She was probably the only person who was genuinely happy about the girl. The queen whispered softly to her daughter, "You are mine alone. I will love you and cherish you." If a boy had been born, he would have been immediately taken away from his mother and given to nurses and carers and heir. A few weeks before labor and 3 weeks after, the queen was brought to bed. The then medics believed that this would help to save the fetus, and then sooner restore the health of the monarch. It is not difficult to guess how detrimental it was to the condition of a woman deprived of movement and air. It was somewhat easier for Russian sovereigns. In the Middle Ages, the wife of the Grand Duke, and later the Tsar, was literally locked in rooms for a couple of months, so that no one could jinx the future child and so that any contagion, hovering in the air, did not settle on the queen and did not give rise to labor fever. At that time, no one knew that infection could get into the organism of a woman in labor and a child much faster during childbirth in conditions when midwives touched both of them with unwashed hands. Since ancient times, childbirth itself took place in a bathhouse. It promoted quick recovery of the woman in labor and protected the child from infections. The bath was clean and warm, with plenty of hot water. Then queens began to be taken to give birth in separate chambers of the palace. This is where maternity fever became a frequent guest. From its consequences died, in particular, the wife of Alexei Mikhailovich, then his son Fyodor, and many more unfortunate queens. The Russian queens were lucky in the following: there were never crowds coming to watch the births. On the contrary, the sacrament took place as privately as possible. Only the midwife and a few close women were allowed to see the woman in labor. It was out of the question for a man to see the birth. The first man allowed into the chambers of the woman in labor was the priest who blessed the child. Only then did the crowned husband visit the young queen. Childbirth of Catherine E. There was not much happiness in Russian tsaristas. Sometimes they could be removed from the upbringing of children. For example, Catherine II was first isolated in 2 rooms by Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, and after giving birth she took away the infant Paul and left the new mother all alone. Catherine recalled that for about 3 hours she lay on the floor, unable even to drink water. Then the maids came, lifted the Grand Duchess onto the bed, and gave her a drink. Catherine remained in her chambers for several months. She was shown her son only after 40 days. In fact, Elizabeth took her child away from her. By the mid-19th century, childbirth for royalty around the world had become a less risky enterprise. Midwives and doctors were finally using soap, disinfecting rooms and instruments. The Viennese doctor Ignaz Semmelweis, nicknamed the Savior of Mothers, played a decisive role. Childbirth has always been a complicated, exciting and potentially dangerous affair. A queen or queeness could just as easily lose a child or die in childbirth as a simple peasant woman. There were almost no aids or medicines available. Moreover, in Europe, unfortunate royal ladies gave birth in public, which only added to the stress and agony. Today, everything has changed. Even monarchs prefer to give birth in a good clinic, under the supervision of doctors. And there is no need to fear that the baby will be taken away. Any child, whether a girl or a boy, will be greeted with applause and surrounded by the love of the parents.